Everyone, Jason here. I'm going to double check that we are live because I know the one time I don't check is the one time we won't go live. So let's make sure we are up and running as expected. There we are. Awesome. So, hey there, I'm Jason Logston, and this is Exploring Sous Vide. We're all about helping you get the most out of your sous vide machine while talking to some of the biggest names in the industry. Today's sponsor is the ISVA Date Night Showcase. Join us for a free sous vide showcase on January 30th. With Valentine's Day right around the corner, this showcase will be a great opportunity to get some fresh ideas for that special meal to impress your special someone. Join seven talented cooks as they demonstrate some of their favorite ways to spell out love on a plate. You can sign up for free at theisva.net/date night. And remember, all these episodes are available as a podcast on your favorite podcast players, or you can join us live every Thursday when we record these episodes. You can ask the guest questions, talk to the other cooks in the comments, and even see our smiling faces. So join us Thursdays at afmeasy.com/show or search for Exploring Sous Vide on your favorite podcast platform. Say hi in the comments if you're joining us. I see we have Rosemary Simpson, who is also going to be one of the demoists at the Date Night Showcase. Looking forward to having her contribute again. We have Mike Lashardi, the co-founder of the International Sous Vide Association. He'll be doing a demo, and he's joining us. And I'm sure a few other people will be joining in. We got Richard Jensen saying hello from a somewhat overcast and rainy Dallas-Fort Worth. So say hi in the comments and let us know any questions you have for today's guest. We're going to be talking not only sous vide, but also modernist cooking and ingredients. So it should be a fun time. We got Paul McCreary. How's it going, Paul? Let us know what you're interested in learning about modernist cooking. It's a pretty exciting realm of cooking, and I'm looking forward to diving in. So on to the show. Sous vide cooks tend to like experimenting in the kitchen, challenging themselves and learning new techniques. But with so many techniques available, it can be hard to figure out where to start. But luckily, today's guest is the perfect person to help us out. I can't wait to learn from him, Scott Guerin, for the research and development chef at Modernist Pantry. Scott, welcome to Exploring Sous Vide.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Glad we could get your internet issues sorted out.
Yeah, they may go in and out. Hopefully we can make this entire hour without a big issue. But yeah, it's of course, of all days, today is the day we have internet issues. So, but thanks for having me.
Biggest show on the internet, the Exploring Sous Vide show. It's just so disappointing to have issues going into this. No. So I can't wait to dive into a lot of the modernist ingredients and techniques. But before we get started, I always like to ask, what is it like around your dinner table on a typical day?
Well, me, my wife, and my two young children, it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple at home. I do what I can to try and, bring things to the 21st century. But my kids tend to love hot dogs and chicken nuggets and things that make them happy. And when they're happy, I'm happy. So there is times where I'll experiment at home, but I just don't have all my toys at home. At work, behind me, I have all my stuff that you just don't have the luxury at home sometimes. So dinner night at home, very different than dinner night when you're either in a restaurant or the kitchen. Yeah.
You have to keep the clients happy, and sometimes the clients are kids, and all they want is chicken fingers, and you have to give them to
borderline junk food all the time. But we try, we do our best.
Speaking of hot dogs, Dave Petranczyk told me that I have to ask you about your experiments trying to come up with meatless patties. He said that it almost killed you over the summer trying to work on it. I'd love to hear some about this journey.
Yeah, so I took quite the deep dive like last year, all of 2020. Of course, I chose 2020 of all years to then deep dive into teaching myself how to make plant-based meat, kind of surrogates. And I'm very proud of some of the things that we were able to come up with. I didn't really have a guideline. I reverse engineered pretty much, I took a package of plant-based meat and I went on the back and I calculated, where the protein comes from and all this. And I tried to make my own recipe out of it. And it took quite a bit. And it was like something like 30-something tests just on the burger alone. And once I had the burger, I had a basic understanding of how I could then take that and put it into different meats. And I was able to make burgers, sausage, hot dog, chicken nuggets. And coming soon is a plant-based steak recipe that was, it just kind of like came to me when I was making pâte brisée, and I looked at it. I vacuum sealed the pâte brisée, and when I cut into it, it looked like, you know, the marbling of a steak. And I was like, can I take this idea and, you know, put it into my plant-based meat recipe? And I was actually able to do it, and pretty happy with the results. So that'll be out in the next like 2 months or so on our YouTube channel and our blog. But yeah, it was very difficult coming up with the original burger recipe to like look like a burger, taste like a burger. But, you know, in our minds as cooks, sometimes we go too far and we're like adding salt and flavors when ground beef is just very plain. It's shockingly plain. So having to dial back and then try to figure out how I can, you know, make these things delicious, craveable, but also plant-based. You know, I would hope that everyone would go and check out blog.modernistpantry.com and look at all those great recipes. But yeah, it was very difficult, but it's super rewarding when you get something that, you know, can shock people and make them think that it's actually a real burger or hot dog. The hot dog is really cool too. I'm very, very proud of the hot dog.
What was the biggest stumbling point? Was it the texture or flavor, or just what was the biggest issue?
So flavor is always going to be an issue. It's going to be very difficult to make things that are based in soy and faba bean taste like meat.
Pretty much, it's hard to make anything that's not something taste like something else, right? Regardless of protein versus vegetable.
Yeah, so I tried to just pump as much like umami flavor in there, you know, white pepper, and we have a new ingredient, umami powder, which is, you know, made from soy and things like that. So we just tried to put as much umami powder into it not umami powder, umami flavor, so that when you do taste, you get that like real savory kind of just like punch of flavor, and makes it very craveable. So yeah, and just very difficult.
Talk a little bit about what Modernist Pantry does. I've worked with Modernist Pantry for, I don't know, probably 6 years now. You know, I sell my book as part of your kits, so you're getting started kits, but a lot of people listening might not understand kind of what type of ingredients and equipment you sell.
Yeah, so Modernist Pantry is it's a company where we sell a very small amount of ingredients that generally you wouldn't be able to find. And those ingredients allow you to kind of turn anything into a magical or memorable experience, right? Like, so if you wanted to add a foam or spherification or a gel noodle to a dish, we sell those, but we sell them in acceptable quantities. Like, you don't need a 55-pound bag of locust bean gum for anything. Like, no home cook or most kitchens aren't going to be able to use that much. So if you need 50 grams, that could last you 2 years, right? And it's great because it's dry. It has super shelf stable, and it doesn't take up a lot of space. But yeah, that's what we do. We sell those hard to find ingredients to help you change and alter whatever it is that you're making.
That definitely seemed to be, you know, when I was getting started with modernist cooking, it was like, oh, I'd love to get some soy lecithin, and it was like 50-pound bags or Modernist Pantry. You know? Exactly right. You can have something that will last you for 6 months, or that will last you for your lifetime, basically.
Yeah, I think the 50 gram quantities is just the best amount for a home cook. And most, kitchens, most restaurant kitchens, 50 grams it goes a long way. That's like a good month's worth if you're, even if it's on the menu, because sometimes you only need like 0.5 of a gram or 1 gram to make a quart or, a gallon of something. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, for a lot of modernist ingredients, you're not talking, it's not like flour or something that you're using, cups of every time you use it. A lot of stuff is really small quantities for going into large amounts of liquid.
Yeah, exactly.
For people that aren't into modernist cooking, but they're interested, what are some good starter either techniques or ingredients to dive into, in your opinion?
Ooh. So the most basic ones are going to be, items like Ensorbit M. So Ensorbit M is a very simple ingredient. It's a type of tapioca maltodextrin. And what it is, it allows you to turn oils into powders. So I see someone in the chat had commented about duck fat. You could then take duck fat and you could turn it into a powder. You could sprinkle it on something. But when you eat that powder, the maltodextrin melts away immediately, and you're just left with the flavor of that oil. So you can really, transform that oil into something that's a little bit more edible. You can almost make like a crust of it and put it on something. So when you eat it, you get that rush of, duck fat flavor without, having to just drizzle duck fat on top. You can put it in a different texture.
I like making a bacon spread from that you take the bacon grease, mix it enough so it's like a nice paste, and put that on some fresh bread with some other garnishes, and it's just like it melts in your mouth. It's so good.
Yeah, and that's just one ingredient. We literally have hundreds of ingredients like that. So even if you just need like a basic thickener or foaming agent, I think Foam Magic is our like best foaming agent. You could put, you take, let's say, 1 quart, and if you put 10 grams of the Foam Magic in it, you can just make foam for days. So whatever your flavorful liquid is, if you want to make strawberry foam out of strawberry jus, you just put that in there and you can make strawberry foam pretty much forever.
It was fun when I was diving into modernist techniques, because it was kind of like when I was getting started with sous vide 10 or 11 years ago, that a lot of the things written about it were from like culinary scientists that were communicating this to other chefs,
Yes.
So be like, well, you take, your duck consomme, and this is the 12-step process to get to the consomme. And then you use these ingredients in it. And then when I started looking at it, you boil it down, kind of what you're saying, a lot of them are pretty easy. Like if you want to experiment with making a nice like air, which is just a really, fine foam, it's like take some soy lecithin and some like soy sauce and use one of those little $10, latte frothers, and you have a foam. And all your friends would be like, what the heck is this? And you're like, yeah, I slaved all day. It did not take me just 5 minutes, I promise.
Yeah, some of it is so easy, but that's the magic in it. Literally, it's the magic of you make something that makes someone go, oh, wow, like look at how much you know. And it's really just one ingredient and one tool that you probably already have. And you have something that's so special and a familiar flavor. That's one of the best things, is taking a familiar flavor, making it into a different, texture or presentation, and then giving it to someone, because that adds nostalgia to a dish. All these things we don't necessarily think about, you can add to a dish in a different, new, exciting way.
Yeah, a lot of people don't want to take the time to like make a foam or a froth, but they will take the time to make that exact same sauce and then reduce it down and make a roux and add that to thicken it. And it's like, well, you just did, more steps than you would have to do something that's a little different, a little more like fancy and upscale.
Yeah, and it all works out in certain ways. Like there's something for everything, and it doesn't have to be like the focus of a dish either, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can add a little bit of a xanthan gum or a little bit of soy lecithin to an emulsion just to make sure it doesn't break, right?
Yeah.
You don't want your Caesar dressing to break. You can add a little bit of this. There's so many little things and so many like applications for all these ingredients that we could use in everyday cooking.
Yeah, I will never make a puree of pretty much anything without using a little bit of xanthan gum just to hold it together. Otherwise you get those layers of it separating out after 5 or 10 minutes. And with the xanthan gum, it just holds it together and doesn't really change consistency.
That's a funny story. We literally are doing a episode of our YouTube show on syneresis, or like, the separating of the liquids, and perfected xanthan gum is an ingredient that we have, which is like a prehydrated xanthan gum. So there's like no ability for it to clump. Just makes it very easy to mix in. And I made 13 different types of ketchup out of a bunch of different ingredients. I made corn ketchup and kimchi ketchup, and just basically replaced the tomato paste with a bunch of different ingredients and used the xanthan gum to make it, everything just so consistent and not separating. And the most crazy one, I'll say it, is instead of putting tomato paste, we took pretty low quality beef jerky and we pureed the beef jerky and made beef jerky ketchup. And I will tell you, it is surprisingly delicious. It's like smoky, salty, sweet, savory. It's like incredible.
That sounds terrifying, but I could see how it would actually end up being pretty good.
We thought we were like, this is probably going to be disgusting, but we ate it. We're like, this has everything you want from a food. It's literally every flavor, and it's so good.
I think that's one of the things that I enjoyed doing with modernist cooking, is that when I was approaching and trying to figure out what to write about in recipes, it was really this different mindset of, not how can I make this perfect food? Like that's a good end goal. But like when I was experimenting, it was like, what's something fun to do? What's something interesting? And you would think of something like that. It's like, I'm not sure. I don't know if this is going to work, but let's dive in and try it. And, some percent of the time it does turn out really well, and it's
Yeah.
an enjoyable experience.
And when it doesn't turn out, you learn from it, right? It's like, well, I know I can't do that anymore. So all these little building blocks, especially with me, is like, I'm not a food scientist, right? Like I've taught myself a lot of food science, but I don't have a degree in food science. But I've read a lot of scientific journals and I've tried to learn from their mistakes. And then I've made dozens, if not hundreds of mistakes to learn like, okay, I know where to navigate and figure out what would work from, these set of ingredients. And sometimes I would do it and the theory in my mind doesn't work. So I just move into something else and try something else. So it's like so many different little things that these ingredients really allow you to do.
And a lot of them are pretty flexible. Like xanthan gum you can add it in small quantities until it gets to the effect you're trying to get to. And it doesn't take you more than once to be like, okay, if I add too much, it gets the consistency of snot. Like it's a very clear that you don't want to add too much, but you can add it slowly. And up until that point, it's like super easy to work with. And I was really surprised how forgiving a lot of them actually were.
Oh yeah. Some of them,
yeah,
not all of them. Yeah. Something like a xanthan gum. If you get to the point where you're using too much, you're going to get a texture from it. You're going to get that mucousy kind of texture, which snot is what people say. I try not to use it just because it's so unappealing. But yeah. It does have that, right? Other ones do not. So if you go with something like a Tara gum or an acacia gum, you won't get that texture, but you can get the same kind of emulsifying qualities. So there's so many different ones that you can choose from. And once you understand how to use xanthan gum, you know how to use pretty much every gum from then on. So it's like, okay, this doesn't work here. What's the texture of these other gums that I might have in my cabinet? Or maybe I want to pick up a 50-gram pack for like $5 at Modernist Pantry, right? And then you can see, is it going to make your recipe better? And if not, there's definitely another use for it.
And I think that's one thing that a lot of people, there are, and I'd love to get into a little bit of like the, more of the foams, the, fluid gels and spheres, some of that stuff. But at the base level, a lot of these ingredients are just ingredients that if you want a specific texture, then you can use flour. And if you want a different texture that a lot of us associate more with like Chinese American cuisine, then you might want to use like a cornstarch, and you're going to have a different mouthfeel and a different texture. They're both white powders, like a lot of the ingredients are. Like it is just a different ingredient made from something else that affects food in a different way. And we're just not, our grandmas didn't use them, so we're not familiar with them. So they're modernist to us, but they do very similar things, just creating mouthfeel and thickening or, giving structure to foods.
The way I like to put it is like, the first person who used sodium bicarbonate in a baking dish probably, didn't necessarily know what they're doing. And of course, they didn't go to their friends, or they maybe did and said, I use sodium bicarbonate in this. And everyone said, I don't know what that is. That sounds like a chemical. That sounds like poison, right? But once these kind of start coming into everyone's, every day, xanthan gum's getting there. People know what it is. But a lot of people just read these things on the packages and they're programmed to think that these are all scary. These are all terrible, but they're just ingredients. And a lot of them have great uses to help you. That's what they're here for. They're here to help you. So once you understand them and you start to get them, you're not scared of them anymore, rather than, or we give it a name that's like baking soda rather than sodium bicarbonate, and everyone wants it now. So, but yeah.
I did a presentation on why people should think about modernist cooking, and I like hit some of the myths or whatever. And one was like why it's complicated. And my point was that it's written, most of the literature is written by scientists, And so I go through like, you take the liquid H2O and you combine it with, and I go through this whole thing. And it's basically this very in-depth scientific step-by-step process. And then I say, or as you just add water to the instant pancake mix and throw it on the griddle. It's like, we know that as a simple process, but it still has the same amount of like crazy science going on in the background, maybe even more than most stuff we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's weird because my mind has to think in two ways. Because part of me is an educator. I educate on YouTube. I come from an education background. That's what I did before this. I was a culinary instructor. So it's like, how am I going to say this in the most common ways? And that's why I actually chose recently was ketchup for that, that new episode that's coming about syneresis, because I could sit here and tell you about syneresis and the expelling of liquids out of like a protein complex. But if I tell you ketchup, and you know how you open up that bottle and it squirts out that wet stuff at first, there's a way to stop that, right? And it's by using xanthan gum just to thicken up those liquids a little bit more so they don't separate. And now that's way easier than me having to go through, why these proteins or why the pectin in here squeezes itself and expels the liquid and all that. We don't have to get into that. It's really just break it down to the most simple terms and educate people so that they understand what these ingredients are, and maybe they want to use them. And maybe it becomes something normal to them, and then their friends, and then more people. And then, we can all have better food because of it.
I was listening to someone try to explain what a fluid gel was. They're like, well, sometimes it behaves like a liquid and sometimes it behaves like a gel, and the person was just glazing over. And I was like, ketchup's always the perfect example for everything. Mm-hmm. It's like, ketchup's in the bottle and you shake it and nothing comes out, and then suddenly it all comes out all over your burger. That is how a fluid gel behaves. It was a solid, and then it decided to be a liquid, and now it was a liquid all over your burger and you had too much.
Yeah, it's a solid till pressure's applied. Or you could use the word thixotropic, which makes people go, huh? Right.
I knew modernist cooking wasn't too bad when my dad started using Ultratex when I brought it over to thicken all of his gravies. He's just like, it works so much better than flour and it's more convenient. So
it tastes like nothing. It works. Yeah. And when things work like Ultratex does, that's the best. Like that's what really gets people is, oh, this works and I didn't use much and it's better.
Yep. And the was it sodium citrate for making cheese basically melt without splitting apart and looking disgusting. It's like you can make great queso, great like cheddar broccoli soup, and it's super convenient and easy to use.
Yeah, I've always wanted to dive deeper into that and see what other things that contain casein protein and fat, and just try and figure out a new way to use sodium citrate, because that's the most common. But me, I always want to do that next thing. Like, what else can I possibly do with that? And I have some ideas in my notes somewhere, but one day I'll eventually get to it and just try something new,
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I always run into trouble with, now that we've talked about all the easy applications, one of the ones that I struggle with is spherification. I feel like a quarter of the time it works perfectly. Half the time, some of them work, and then like a quarter of the time I just can't get anything to gel properly. And I could never get to where I figured out that I actually could figure out what's going on, like wrong. It was really frustrating.
Yeah, spherification is I would say like it's the sexiest, right? Like when it's done right, it's like, oh wow, that's amazing. What's happening here is amazing. Yeah. But it's the most finicky, right? If you do one thing wrong, you're not getting spheres, and that's it. Yep. Right? That's the end of story. So one thing I would always suggest is just making sure you have the proper amount of calcium and the proper amount of sodium alginate. The second thing is the acid. The acid content of your flavorful liquid is a make or break. If it's riding that 4.0 line, it's not working. Sodium citrate, I'm not sure if you use it, but like sodium citrate works the best for just that buffering of the acid. So for whatever the amount of liquid, 0.8% of the total weight of that liquid, add sodium citrate, and it's going to buffer it to just above 4 pH. At just above 4 pH, it's going to work.
For those that don't know how spherification works, it just dawned on me that not everyone's. Sorry, I was starting.
No, you're
I'm
right.
selfishly asking questions as the host. Not everyone has done research.
I can talk all the way through it if you need me to.
How does, in general, like as a simple aspect, how does spherification actually work? What is happening there?
Oh, you broke up there for a second.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
From a simple point of view, how does spherification actually work? What is happening from a high level during that process?
Okay. So I'll give it the most basic understanding first, and then we can go a little bit deeper. What's happening is it's a reaction between two different ingredients. Sodium alginate, and when it comes in contact with calcium, it gels. So that's what's happening. It's creating a gel. So generally you would add, in direct spherification, you would add sodium alginate to a flavorful liquid, and then you would add calcium to a water bath. And when that flavorful liquid goes in there, the calcium, gels along the outside and creates this nice thin film around whatever that flavorful liquid is. And you could do it in reverse too. Someone just mentioned boba tea. So yeah, if you did it in reverse, you would just put the calcium into your flavorful liquid in a sodium alginate bath. Mm-hmm. Now, what's actually happening is the calcium is reacting with that sodium alginate and turning these polymers into a net, a really finely, tightly woven net that holds onto that liquid. So basically, the calcium is getting sucked into that liquid and creating this net that just holds in, onto the liquid. Direct spherification, that net will not stop. It will go all the way to the center, and you would end up with little beads rather than little, poppable boba or pearls, right? Reverse spherification, the gelling happens outward. So once you remove it from that sodium alginate liquid and rinse it off, no more gel can be made because there's no sodium alginate in the center liquid. So you can have pretty much spheres that are liquid for as long as you need them to be. Forever is a word, but I don't think it would be forever. Eventually, something would happen to it. But so basically, you're left with this really beautiful sphere of liquid that is great for presentations. In my mind, I've been working out a way to actually get fat into the center without having to puncture it with a needle, but that's a conversation for another day. But also just whatever presentation you want, if you want to have a nice, beautiful, almost perfectly round sphere, then when you pop it, you get this rush of flavor. That's what it's there for. The most famous, the original spherification was a pureed green olive, and that was spherified. And then when you ate it, it looked like an olive. Obviously, it was in a different form, and then you got this big burst of olive flavor. So that's a really fascinating way to do it, is you eat something, and then it pops, and boom, you're just left with this massive rush of flavor. So that's spherification.
I really enjoy spherified cocktails. Are always great. Yep. Those are, especially for parties, are very fun, unique.
I did about 6 different recipes on the blog last year about cocktail pods. So it's just one pop, and basically I call them edible cocktail glasses. Nice. People always talk about edible water bottles, but yeah, it's edible cocktail glasses.
I've done a few with, I did a mango soup that you could serve that with some mint and on a spoon, and people really got a kick out of that. It is, like you said, it's one of those that people see and they're like, oh, this is, I have no idea what's happening here. And then if you use, like you were saying earlier, if you use something that's a very familiar flavor to them, then they're kind of delighted by what's coming out of it.
Yeah, there's always a way to play with people's minds too. Is you can make it blue with some coloring, and then when people eat it, they get this flavor, but their mind doesn't connect it to blue, and you can really trick people and give them just an amazing experience. And that's at the heart of it, is what we're trying to do with food anyways. One more little tip about spherification that you're having issues with is when you're dealing with your calcium content and your sodium alginate content, I always like to go a little bit higher than what the norms, what the average ratios are. So I like to go 1.4% to the total weight of the flavorful liquid of sodium alginate, where 1% is normally what it is. And I always like to go higher on the calcium. More calcium, the more it's going to attack the outside, and it's going to create a net faster. You know what I mean? So some people go less, but I always go a little bit more. Calcium's super cheap, and you can make them happen faster. Those spheres, gel faster, and just be able to, work faster and cleaner that way.
Nice. Might have to dive back in when I have some time in amongst the podcasts, because there's always fun to do.
Yeah,
I still do a lot of foams. Using a whipping siphon is one of my favorite things because it is so many uses. I don't know. Do you use whipping siphons often, or is that?
Yeah, it depends on the type of foam I'm trying to make. So if I want to make a really dense, creamy foam, I'll use a whipping siphon. If I want to make a light, lacy foam, it's either a hand blender. We actually have this great machine called a magic air maker. So it's basically just an aerated stone you put in there, and you can create tons of foam. It's great for working on the line because you can just put it in there and just have foam constantly for whatever dish you're trying to make. So it really depends on the texture. If you're making like a light air, or if you're making a dense one, then I'll go with the Issy, the whipping siphon.
Yes. What is, if someone's interested in, if someone wants to get into foams, you had mentioned a good foaming product that you recommend. Which one was that, and what type of foams does that make?
So Foam Magic, and it can make anything. It can make dense or lacy foams or whatever you really need it to be. It works well with alcohol. It works well pretty much with anything. Foam Magic is the one to use. Nice. My preference. Another one I really like is Sucrose Esters. Recently, I think we just put it up on the blog, was an instant foam cocktail. So we actually make a simple syrup with the sucrose esters, make the cocktail, and then when you pour the cocktail tableside, you can foam it in front of the guest, right? You could put the aerated stone of the Magic Air Maker in there, and it foams in the glass they're drinking out of, right? So it's very cool, and it's stable foam too. So it's not going to dissipate immediately, right? It'll sit there. And so we've just made like a traditional daiquiri, like a very simple cocktail, but then it's just elevated to the next level.
That's a great idea. And I love the different presentation aspects that go into some of the modernist dishes that are really, you can explore some fun ways with it. You know, obviously people like Grant and Alenia get out there on the edges of what actual dishes is, but even within the normal confines of dishes, you can do some cool stuff.
Yeah.
How do you, when you're approaching a dish, how do you decide what should be a modernist ingredient, what should be a traditional ingredient? How do you kind of consider these when you're doing a larger dish, not just a one-off cocktail or something that you're showcasing your ingredients, but something that's more of a dinner or a meal?
It really depends. See, I don't ever try to shoehorn an ingredient in. Like I always just think, as I'm cooking, I'll see an issue and I'll be like, I need something here to just make it easier or make it better. And then that's where the ingredient comes in. There's never really I got to put this in here because I have to, right? It's what works. Or sometimes you can cook stuff without these ingredients, but if you run into an issue, that's where they help. So whenever I find an issue, I realize, okay, I can put it in here. Or if there's a known issue, if something stales really fast, I know ways around that. If an emulsion breaks, I know ways around that, right? Like you'll just kind of get a logbook of all the things, all the issues that you can fix, and then you just keep pulling from that until you find a better way to do it.
Mike wants to know, what is one technique that every cook should learn to really elevate their cooking, either from a flavor or culinary standpoint or from a plating styling standpoint?
Ooh, the plating styling standpoint is a difficult question because I find that to be very personal, right? Like plating and styling is all in the person. A technique that someone should learn, is this maybe a modernist technique or is this a traditional technique? Because I think you should always know the baseline traditional techniques as much as possible before you move into the modernist, right? It's very difficult to start on rung 5 of the ladder, right? You always got to start at the lower part of the ladder. So I would always suggest, trying to make sure the base techniques as much as possible before you can quote, cheat a little bit and figure it out. But
you have to do the math the long way before the teacher teaches you you can just do this and it's a lot easier. You have to work it out on your own first.
I would suggest if someone wants to try, let's say, a first type of modernist like recipe, I would go with a fluid gel just because of how simple it is and you understand a lot. It really runs you through like the basics of a lot of cooking is like measuring and scaling, then heating to a proper temperature, cooling, shearing, and then, into the final plating. So it runs you through a lot of the basic of how to use a lot of these ingredients. So that's one I would suggest, at least, as a starting point.
I feel like they're pretty forgiving too, that it is. I mean, if you don't know, you basically make a gel and then you blend the gel and it turns into a fluid gel. And so, it's easier to thin a fluid gel than it is like a foam or something that you've already made. And if it's a little too liquid, you can, always thicken it with other things. So I could see why that would be a really good technique. And then depending what ingredient you use, you get different mouthfeels as well. So you can even explore that pretty easily within the same realm.
Yeah, you can do that. And then also you're going to run into that syneresis issue. So you're going to have to add in some sort of locust bean gum or xanthan gum. But yeah, it runs you through everything you really need to know as like a baseline for how to do this. Because similar to savory cooking and baking, where they're similar but different, it's modernist, type of cooking can also be that way too.
I always felt it was really helpful for people to dive into one very specific aspect, whether that's just, a type of foam or a certain ingredient, because there is so much out there and it can be really hard to figure out what the differences are. And like you're talking about, like one of my big ones was making like an agar gel, and you make it and it's really, pretty easy to make, but then start to fall apart, and you do a little bit of reading and like, well, if you add locust bean gum, then it no longer does that. And seeing those side by side, it was just like so clear how a little bit of, locust bean gum would make it, now that you have like bendable noodles, that you have so much more flexibility, where if you were jumping around, you probably wouldn't. It'd be one of those things. Well, some people recommend agar, some people recommend a combo, and I don't know why, because I've been jumping. Where I feel like doing those techniques, diving in, you can see those differences that aren't enormous, but they're pretty apparent when they're right next to each other.
Yeah, there's all these things. So what you're saying is, you would follow like a basic understanding of one ingredient, and it's going to pull you into another ingredient, right? So like with that, and then you're going to find so many more different things. So yes, with the agar, and then you go, oh, well, gelling gum does this, and it's a bit more non-thermal reversible, which means it just doesn't melt. So you can actually, it's way more forgiving than agar. And then you realize it has a better texture, and it still works the same way with locust bean gum. So it's always a ladder of like, what's next, what's better, and then figuring out what works for you.
Rosemary Simpson has a good question. She says, what is the definition of modernist cooking?
So modernist came from, different modern cooks, and then modernist cuisine was a book that came out. But modern just means like nouveau. It used to be called nouveau cooking or nouvelle cooking. And it's just what's new, what's on the forefront, and what's the next thing in cooking. So right now, modernist is these types of ingredients, and just how do you apply them to traditional ingredients to make better recipes.
Nice. I like that. That's a nice, simple explanation.
I try to.
I'm sure it's not the first time you've been asked that.
No.
So speaking of techniques that a lot of us know and kind of pushing them, you mentioned that you recently sous-vided chlorophyll.
Yeah, chlorophyll. Okay, so yeah, I added that because it's just so weird. Like, what is that? So what chlorophyll is like the pure green color from green plants. And the reason why you would do that is to actually extract it and place it into another recipe. So if we've all done sous vide, we probably have all done a Sous-Vide Hollandaise, right? Sous-Vide Hollandaise is great. You can reuse it. You don't have to throw it away. It's got an excellent texture, and you can really nail it down. Chef Steps made like this Sous-Vide Hollandaise recipe that blew my mind when I was younger. And then I kind of took it, and I wanted to make it my own, because I don't want to just straight up, one for one, take their recipe. So I was thinking about making like a green eggs and ham. So I took the chlorophyll, and what chlorophyll is I take spinach and whatever other ingredients you want that are green, and you put them with water and you blend them, and then you strain out the water and you save that water. Then you put that water into a vacuum seal bag, and you put it into 158-degree Fahrenheit bath. And at that 158 degrees, it coagulates the chlorophyll, and it'll separate from the water of the plant. Then you can strain off all that pure green, and you can add it, and it has like a really rich green flavor, if you know what I mean, like slightly grassy, slightly vegetal. And I was able to add it to my my hollandaise, but the ingredients, it wasn't just spinach. I did tarragon and I did scallion too, to get kind of like a béarnaise flavor, and I made like a béarnaise that way. So I made it like a very green hollandaise that I was able to put to an ISI, and I did that in a sous vide. So it's just something different. I know at 158 degrees, I can sit there over a pot and try and skim it off immediately at 158, or I could throw it into a bag, forget about it for half an hour, come back, put it through a super bag, and just have like this perfect green paste that I can add to anything.
That is amazing. I'd never heard of making kind of the green paste dye.
Yeah, if you end up with like a bunch of greens that you're not going to use, or if you're doing some prep, you can throw any like tops of scallions that you're not going to use. And we generally always have like a bag of spinach. If you're not going to use it, throw it in there, make some chlorophyll, and then save it and add it to something. You can get added to dressings. It can get added pretty much to anything that's not going to be overheated, because the reason why you're doing that is so it doesn't turn brown. But yeah, you can add it to all sorts of things to get that really rich, natural green flavor or color and a little bit of flavor.
What other interesting uses have you found for sous vide that's a little out of the norm?
So, I mean, I've tried so many different things, and in my mind, generally, I'll look to like what's online, and then I'll be like, oh, I didn't invent that. Oh, I didn't invent that. You know what I mean? It's like, so one thing that
it can be uses that you just enjoy that you didn't personally invent. A lot of us aren't inventing techniques, so we're open to everything.
I love cooking meats in the sous vide. I think just really wonderful pork roast that I made recently for my green eggs and ham is just like, oh, this is so good. I was able to take like a 6-bone pork roast and just cook it and make it be like a prime rib, right? It was super delicate, super tender, perfectly cooked, just at 135 degrees for 4 hours. So easy. I made it for my wife and she liked it, so that's always a plus. But I was able to use the Hydro Pro, which is the new Polyscience. I can actually grab one. If I don't want to rip this computer off. But sorry to all the people who are watching online. So, have you seen it yet?
Yes, we had Dave Petranzik come on and demoed it. Yeah.
It's incredible.
How is it in a kitchen? We've only had Dave come on and doing his spiel. We all know how unsavory Dave Petranzik is, so you can never trust his judgment. But
he is quite the surly fellow. Yeah. So I think it's amazing. I don't know if he showed. We'll just do it. Literally the easiest one to clean ever. It is the easiest circulator in the world to clean. It just works. Everything about it works so much better than any other one that I have. I have like a 8-year-old Innova back there that's just it's been mine for years. But it's like then I get my hands on this. The bath's ready in 25 minutes. It's incredible. Everything about it is good. And Dave was nice enough to send me over the Hydro Pro Plus. Mm-hmm. So I'm the second person in the world to use the Hydro Pro Plus, the only working like legit model. Was the second one. We shot a video about it. That should be out next week. I don't know if that's if we're supposed to, but next week, yeah, we're going to shoot a video, or we already shot a video and should go live on our site about the Hydro Pro and the Hydro Pro Plus. And you can see that recipe, the chlorophyll béarnaise and the pork roast like prime rib recipe. So yeah, you can definitely check that out. But yeah, I've been using this and it's incredible. And I suggest everyone purchase one at modernistpantry.com.
Yeah. I think I have my order in for my Hydro Pro Plus. I think we just submitted that. So I'm excited to get my hands on one soon.
Yeah, we're actually going to be doing a giveaway on our YouTube video. So if anyone's watching this, you can go over to our YouTube video next week and you'll get the Hydro Pro Plus for the price of a Hydro Pro. So $100 off. It's a great.
What's your YouTube channel?
I believe it's Kitchen Alchemy by Modernist Pantry. But if you just type in Modernist Pantry, you should be able to find us. The videos are entitled WTF. So it's just like we transform food. It's a fun little play on words. But it's where we tell you about all these ingredients. So if you see a certain ingredient that you don't know, but you want to try it out, we give you basically 10 to 15, sometimes 20-minute rundown of what this ingredient is, how do you use it. Here's a quick couple recipes, but really it's up to you. Get it, try it, let us know how you like it. Let us know if it works for you and what you made with it.
I highly recommend people checking out, both your channel and just trying some modernist ingredients in general. Like a lot of sous vide cooks are adventurous. A lot of these ingredients, like we were talking about, aren't that unusual or unique. You're not talking about having to do really crazy things to put it together to get some of these benefits and to kind of dip your toes in the water. So, check out Modernist Pantry. You can check out Amazing Food Made Easy with my recipes on there. Ideally, you buy my book from Modernist Pantry, and then it's win-win for all of us. Since you experiment with so many different things, what's something that you've cooked sous vide that turned out well sous vide, and you're like, I really prefer the traditional way of making this still?
That's a tough one. So some things work. Obviously, some things are great sous vide, but there's nothing like, like a properly grilled steak on the grill. While I do love placing all steaks into the circulator and pulling them out and placing them on the grill, sometimes as a person who's worked on a grill, it's easy to just in 15 minutes I can have a perfectly done steak, and I know how to do it in my head. Like I could just sit there and just make a steak. But I really love like that. And sometimes the circulator makes them a bit too wet for the outside, even if you pat them dry. And I really don't like taking like a Searsall and just finishing the entire steak. It just seems a bit slow. It's great for touching up steaks and like things that come out of the sous vide, but I just don't want to be sitting there forever. When I know if I get my grill beautifully hot and I pop it on there, and I can do it almost perfectly every time with a thermometer, of course. But
of course. We're not wizards just because you can spherify liquids. What modernist dish do you think that you've seen that just like blew your mind the most, that with you seeing so many, what was just like, wow, I did just an interesting combination?
Yeah, that's difficult because there's so many that come through and we see, and we're just constantly looking at. So I'm racking my brain a little bit now. I think the first time I saw spherification, it was like, oh, okay, this is next level stuff. Like, I don't understand what's going on here. Pretty much over a decade ago now at this point, is like when I was young. I was a kid. I was 20 something years old, and I was just like, I don't understand how this is happening. And I thought I would never get it. I just thought I would never understand that. But like spherification is one of those things, like now I'm at the point where I'm happy to say I've mastered it, but I know the next time I'll make it, it'll just get totally screwed up, and I'll be like, oh, all right, what did I do wrong? And then like backtrack and calculate and figure it out. But it's like, it's one of those things that when you get it down, you're like, okay, now I get it. Like I'm on a different level now, just having to learn how to do this well. And it's a difficult thing, but it is rewarding when you nail them and then you give them to someone and they get it, because you can give them that experience that you had if they've never seen it before.
I love that. Just the passing on of the knowledge torch to keep culinary innovation and creativity alive.
Yeah, every when I was a culinary teacher, every 6 weeks I'd have to teach that. So it's like, and I mean, I knew how to do it, but I didn't know now like I do now, So it's like, it took a little while for me to really get it, and then obviously I would show those kids and just pray to God that I didn't screw it up in front of them, right?
You do so much interesting experimentation and pushing the envelopes in various directions. Who inspires you, and where do you look for inspiration in your cooking?
There's a lot of inspirations for cooking and things like this. Obviously, the main ones we're going to go to are Grant Achatz and everyone over at Modernist Cuisine. Chef Steps really super inspired me when I was younger and I was like teaching, and just like, okay, they're doing things that are different, and they're trying things that are different. And like, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to try different things. And very few people have the budget to just try whatever they want. And thankfully now I have the ability to try whatever I want and then show people what I was able to figure out from that, you know?
Mm-hmm. So you've mastered your meatless patties and sausages and everything. What is next for you? What's your next project, or that you're excited to dive into?
So every 4 weeks or so, you know, we pick 4 episodes, and I create anywhere from 5 to 9 recipes, depending on those 4 episodes. So it's just like constantly, you know, turning over. At this point, I can tell you what I'm doing now, but I don't know what I'm really going to do next, because it's constantly going. So like I said, I made those ketchups, and then you know, the last cycle we did, I made an extremely stable foam to the point where it actually was able to gel. So I was able to make a gelled foam. That took a lot. So it's just like always going to be something different every 4 weeks. And that's really where I'm at right now. So I have no guidelines this year other than like just elevating, right? We want to make everything better and whatnot. Whereas last year, I really wanted to focus on the plant-based meats. But yeah, this year is really just elevating, finding new techniques, introducing new ingredients. Yeah, that's where we're at right now.
Awesome. Well, if people want to check out more of Scott's videos, more of the information, the ingredients, you can go to modernistpantry.com, check out their YouTube channel, social media, all the places you can find Modernist Pantry, and all the just really cool stuff that Scott and Modernist Pantry is doing, from the simple thickening of a gravy for my dad's pot roast up through spherification, you know, foams, all the other really cool stuff you can do. Scott, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your expertise with everyone here at Exploring Sous-Vide. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.
And thanks to everyone in the comments and who is listening. Remember, you can join us live every Thursday when we record these episodes. You can ask the guest questions, talk to the other cooks in the comments, and even see our smiling faces. So join us Thursdays at afmeasy.com/show, or search for Exploring Sous Vide on your favorite podcast platform. This has been Exploring Sous Vide. We're all about helping you get the most out of your sous vide machine while talking to some of the biggest names in the industry. Till next time, I'm Jason Logston. See you all next Thursday.